All right. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning to some. I'm James Porticos of Pearl, and it is a pleasure to be your moderator to today's Agony Expert Series. And in behalf of the Pearl team and our guest expert, we welcome you to the series. We could start with all of us going into the Zoom chat box and sharing our names and where we come from. It's always interesting to know who are joined by people coming from different geographies in different parts of the globe. And we will also be making use of this chat box later. If you have any questions that you want to pose to our guest expert to respond to. And this is also where um, we will be communicating through with you in the course of the session. So it's either you type your questions in the chat box, or you can actually unmute yourselves and ask your questions straight away. So in our Agony Experts today, we will explore this area where we kind of desire or yearn to improve collaboration, raise levels, and enhance loyalty in our workforce. And we will soon find out from our expert today. So, for those who joined us for the first time, and I'm sure there are people here who've already listened to this explanation, the idea of the agony expert originated from the concept of agony aunt, who by definition is that person who writes a column in a newspaper or magazine in which the person replies to the readers who have written for advice on their personal problems. And we thought it a fitting title to use agony expert, as you folks, our audience, will have access to expert insights. And you know what's good about this is that you can pick and choose from a range of sessions this August, and you can see in the screen, cutting across 8 categories, delivered by 7 world-class experts in today's industry. And today's session is all about diversity, adaptability, and trusted partnerships. And we're honored to have Arthur Shelley, founder and CEO of Intelligent Answers and the producer of Creative Melbourne. His interactive workshops and programs focus on understanding behavior and relationships so it increases productivity and it successfully implements change. And he'll speak to us about diversity, adaptability, and trusted partnerships in the organizations later on. So this is what we do in Pearl as an organization. Pearl is a consulting firm that started in 2004, sold itself, and we launched last year, 2020, with a consulting model, and we geared towards future of work. Our team serves both our clients and our network of over 1,000 experts. Our experts are consultants, business leaders, thought leaders, researchers, and tech partners. And together, we deliver consulting work. We speak in the engagements, lunch and learns, training, coaching, and also organizational and people diagnostics. So we deliver work across broad domains: people, digital innovation, business design, sustainability, change management, and then design. So check us out in our website, www.pearl.com, to find out more about us. And just a quick run through of what's going to happen today. We have Arthur to address the group for approximately 45 minutes, and we will take questions as we go through. And then we will go and wrap things up for you in the last remaining 5 minutes so we can get feedback coming from you on what you thought about the session. So please, again, remember to post your questions in the chat box so we can address these in the Q&A. And on that note, without further ado, I now hand over the floor to Arthur Shelley.
I was still muted. Hello, nice to meet you all. I will just share my screen for a moment, and I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to ask me questions as we go through. So please feel free to unmute and interrupt when you want to ask a question. So here we go. We'll go to a screen. So I see the series is about leadership, um, and there are many aspects to leadership, and particularly compassionate leadership. So let's explore that for a moment. I'm going to come back to this DNA model here a little bit later, in the fourth topic, but I'm going to ask you a question to see what you think and whether that's different to what I think. Because just because we think different, it doesn't mean that we're wrong. We could be both wrong. We could be both right. There could be elements of truth and elements of false in our opinions. But when we engage with each other and talk to each other about those differences, then that's when we really learn. And um, if you just listen to other people, you'll only remember about 5% of it 2 to 4 weeks later. But if you engage in a conversation, you'll remember so much more of it. So I really encourage you to engage in the conversation as much as you possibly can. So, to be true to my word, I'm going to ask you a question. So anyone can answer. You just have to unmute, right? Or you can pop something in the chat if you choose to. Now, if it comes up in the chat, James, I'm not sure whether it comes up on my screen or not. So just be aware if something does come up and I don't see it, let me
Sure.
know.
No worries. I'll take care of that.
So there are several speakers in this series talking about leading with compassion. What does that actually mean? Anyone? Silence is interesting, isn't it?
Sharon Wu says empathy.
Yeah, empathy is a very important part of it. Thank you, Sharon. So that's come up in the chat, did it?
That's right. Reading it
Sharon,
through the
would
chat.
thank you for your contribution. Would you like to add a little bit more to that by speaking, camera on or camera off? Um, if the answer is no and you're a little bit shy, that's okay too.
Sorry, Arthur. I have to be camera off because my mom is just darting about behind me. So,
Well,
beg your
that could
pardon.
be entertaining for everyone, Sharon.
So empathy leadership is very important these days, especially in the pandemic. So I believe leading with compassion relates to that.
Yeah, yeah. And your comment about empathy is really very important, isn't it? Because empathy is about understanding uh, um, how others perceive and how others are feeling about what's going on. And sometimes the way we feel about something, we might not be even able to explain ourselves. And that's an important thing. So asking a question, a compassionate leader will ask a question to understand how other people are feeling. It's quite inclusive, right? Is that what you mean?
Yep, very much that. Thank you, Arthur.
Yeah, no, thank you for the contribution. It's a great insight. Anyone else popping stuff up in the chat yet, James?
Yes, we do. We have another one from Natasha.
Yeah.
Actually, we have two, one from Natasha and one from B. Lian, but I'll go for Natasha first to give
Okay.
psychological safety. And
Yeah.
then, oh, okay. So B. Lian actually said the same thing, psychological safety, kindness, caring.
Mm. And I guess prior to the pandemic, they're not words that you would normally associate with leadership, right? Often uh, leaders come in different sizes and shapes and with different types of mindset and behavior. And some of them are sort of those big scary people at the top, where if you see them coming down the corridor, you hide from because you're afraid. And that's a lead by control and command type style in a very hierarchical organization. And then there's others who are just inspirational. And you look at them and you go, oh, I just want to be like them. You know, so you're absolutely right. I mean, the psychological safety is something that's become more and more important, and in particular, more important during the COVID pandemic. It's the pandemic didn't create VUCA conditions. So when I say VUCA, does anyone know what I mean by VUCA? Yeah, most people have heard of it these days. Volatile, uncertain. Yep, getting a few thumbs up. Volatile, uncertain, ambiguous, and complex. Now, the pandemic didn't create that; it amplified that. A lot of people didn't realize they were dealing with uncertainty when they thought they were comfortable in their little place, but actually, that was only a thin veil over a very unstable environment. But when the pandemic came in, it really highlighted just how unstable everything was. And that's why people are really struggling. And that's why empathy, creating psychological safety, listening and questioning and talking to each other has become far more important for leadership. I've got some comments here. I sat down last night and I thought about this. Well, what is it to me? What do I think leading with compassion means? Now, there may be things on there that you agree with and things on there that you disagree with, but that would make a great conversation. And a great leader will engage in conversation with other people about how they view what's true to them and why that's different to what is truth to somebody else. So I'll just have a quick word about willing, intelligent followers. In a book I wrote 4 or 5 years ago, I said leaders are people with willing, intelligent followers. And all words are very important. I don't consider someone a true leader if their followers are not willing to follow them. They feel that they're forced to follow them. There's a hierarchy of control where you only do what I say because, like, I'm the boss, right? That's not leadership. That's being a boss. That's management, perhaps, but it's not leadership. Yeah? So willing, they want to follow you. Intelligent is important because they've thought about it. They've looked at who you are as a character. They've looked at your values, the way in which you lead, and they make a conscious choice to follow you. You don't want people just to follow you because you're cute. I mean, I outgrew cute years ago, right? But you don't want people to follow you just because you're famous, for example. In fact, you don't even want to be famous unless you're famous for adding some sort of value. Although some people do, right? Some people are just famous for being famous, and they think that that makes them terrific and makes them a better person than other people, which is not true, in my opinion. But you may disagree. So that's what I'm trying to do today. I'm trying to get you to expose you to some of the things that I've been writing about, and also to expose you to some new things that I've been writing about, like mind flex. Anyone care to have a guess what mind flex actually means? We talk about mindset, but what's mind flex? Anyone? No, we're a quiet lot today. That's okay. By the end of it, I hope you're all over talking with each other, right? Because the most powerful thing you can be as a leader is to have your voice heard. If you want to lead, that means standing up and offering a path to other people, offering perspectives, offering advice, not just barking orders at them, but giving people, informing people so that they can make willing, intelligent decisions. Yeah. So the most powerful thing that you have as a leader is your voice, which contributes to your influence. Leaders influence other people. Yeah? Now, Hitler was a very strong leader, but he led people to do things that were immoral. So Hitler influenced other people, and he had willing, intelligent followers, but they weren't looking at the bigger picture. They were making intelligent decisions to preserve their life because he would shoot them if they didn't do what he said. To me, that is a strong leader, but an immoral leader. Morals and control are two different things, right? So what I'd like to walk you through today, share 4 concepts with you, which come from a variety of my books. Mind Flex, by the way, is an adaptable mindset. Mindset. Yeah, James, you were going to say something?
Yes, because in the chat, it is actually exactly what Bilian and Sharon said, adaptability.
Absolutely right. In fact, the book that I hoped was going to be released this week, but we're just running a little bit behind. It's written, but we haven't tidied it up and got it out available yet, is actually called Becoming Adaptable. And to me, the most important thing that you could be, the best leaders are adaptable. We kind of laugh. We say, everyone in the room makes us happy. Some as they enter, others as they leave. And you think about that, it's kind of funny, but it's also true. There's some people that you don't want to be in the room with. because you don't consider them, an authentic leader. You're afraid of them, or you don't respect them because they're a bad person in your eyes. But there's other people that you always want to be in the room with. I would just sit and listen to that person all day, every day. They're inspirational. I just love what they say. And, in that environment, you tend to be a little bit too humble to ask a question. But the most powerful thing that you can do is ask a question. I've met a lot of amazing, inspirational people. And what I've found, like Edward de Bono, for instance, I had lunch with Edward de Bono one day, and he is just incredible. He died earlier this year, actually. He'd written, I don't know, 70 or 80 books. He was the guy that introduced lateral thinking, creativity into management. Amazing, amazing person. If you haven't heard about him, go off and read his stuff. I had lunch with him one day, and we were asking each other questions rather than trying to tell each other opinions. And it was an amazing conversation. It really was. By the way, he loved the organizational zoo, which is another thing that we may talk about briefly later. So let's have a little bit of a look at what we're going to do between now and about another 30 minutes time. I want to introduce 4 things to you. And I'm hoping that these 4 things really stimulate some thoughts in your mind. Maybe you'll ask a question. Maybe this is an agony art or an agony expert, right? You ask a question in order to get an answer. I'd rather you ask a question and I answer that than just to tell you stuff, because I don't really know what it is that you want to know. Yeah? True leadership is inclusive. It's asking questions. It has empathy for the people in the conversation. So I want to role model that and say, look, okay, I'm leading this conversation, but if no one else is in it, it's not really a conversation. It's just a dialogue. It's just a speech, if you like, which of course everyone will forget because they weren't part of. I see you as participants, not attendees. Yeah. And a participant engages, participates, gets involved. Yeah. And a great leader, a compassionate leader, will encourage that. But it takes time, perhaps more than the next 45 minutes, but it takes time to build that confidence. A true leader builds the confidence of those people that are around them so that they can step up and be the most that they can possibly be, and supports them to do that through mentorship, through coaching, through giving them a voice, and through empowering their voice by agreeing with it or disagreeing, but explaining why. You don't just have to agree with everything that everyone says. So the 4 things that I want to talk a little bit about is a thing that I wrote about some time ago. And by the way, all of these links here are free copies of the articles. I'm not collecting your data. You can just go download it. I don't even know you did it. So you can go and collect these and read them. Write me, some questions if you want, and I will answer them. Applied social learning ecosystems is what I believe a true leader creates. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Then we'll come back to a thing called a reverse Bloom learning framework. This is a framework that I wrote, which is the opposite of traditional learning. Same steps, opposite order. And I'll explain why that's actually a far better way to learn. It includes things like asking questions of the people in the room, as I've been doing and encouraging you to do. Is anything else popped up on the chat yet, James? Because I don't see them when they come.
None so far.
Okay, I encourage you to do that. I'll speak a little bit about the behavioral DNA of collaboration. I mean, what a leader will do is you'll get teams to collaborate, work together to find sort of common goals and generate synergies by the different ideas and perspectives in the team. I've designed a way that you can actually visualize what the DNA of collaboration actually looks like. So I can show you a picture and say, this is what collaboration looks like, and then explain it to you. So I've used a creative metaphor to be able to do that. And it's not my opinion. It was the opinion of the people in that conversation. I didn't tell them what it was. I asked them, and they generated this image using the organizational zoo metaphor. And then at the end, we'll just come back to becoming adaptable. I hope by virtue of being involved in this session, You are starting to become adaptable. You're building your confidence. The more adaptable you are, the less stressed you are, the more optimistic you are, and you will develop greater resilience. But becoming adaptable is a bit like becoming fit. You don't sit at home eating popcorn, watching Netflix and get fit. You've got to act differently in order to get fit. You've got to say, okay, if I'm going to become healthier, I'm going to eat less, I'm going to exercise more. There are actions you need to take, and you need to put those actions into place in order to build that fitness, and it takes time. Becoming adaptable is the same. You won't get it exactly right. Like, you're thinking, oh, I kind of want to ask a question, but, maybe I don't. There's an international speaker. Who am I to ask a question? You don't have that confidence. You feel, maybe if I ask a question, I'll look stupid. That is not the case at all. Not with a compassionate leader. That's an interesting question. And we'll often ask the other people, what do you think in the forum? To gather a diversity of opinions. So we'll come back to becoming adaptable. So are there any questions so far? I'll touch on each of these 4 separately. I welcome any question at any point in time. How are we going?
We have one question from Sharon, though. Will the slides be shared after the webinar so that we can access the URL on this slide?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And the only thing I would say with the sharing of the slides, I will give you all of these. And there's some material in here that we may not even talk about today, because I don't know exactly what questions you're going to ask. So I've put a couple of things in. Maybe I'll get a question on that, so I'll put it in. The only thing I ask you is, if you use the material, just acknowledge where it comes from. And that's not to stroke my ego. It actually gives credibility. If it's you saying, look, this guy told us about this is where the article come from, here is the evidence to support this opinion, and this is why I believe it will work for us. So it adds credibility if you can bring something that's actually not just something that was made up 5 minutes ago. There's years and years of research built behind these things. So adding where it comes from really helps you, and it also helps me. Somebody else might say, oh, I'm interested in your work. And that may generate a commercial opportunity, or it might be just a conversation. I don't mind. So yes, you can have the slides. In fact, I've given them to P. Pearl, and they can send them out to everyone who's on the call. No problem. Thank you, Sharon, for asking. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about applied social learning ecosystems. Again, each word is very deliberate. Applied means we're doing something, we're putting something into action. So what is a learning ecosystem? An excellent company actually operates as a learning ecosystem. And one of the reasons I'm supporting P. Pearl is that I believe that's what they're trying to create. They're saying, look, we know there's lots and lots of people around the world who are true experts in their field. We want everyone to get access to that knowledge, to share it, to know that it's there. And we're providing a forum through which people can do that. That is an applied social learning ecosystem. People can do things. They come and act and interact, participate. It's social. We're sharing ideas. We're asking each other questions. We're challenging each other in a constructive way. It's learning. We're all learning from each other. I learn from your questions. I learn from your feedback. P. Pearl learns from what you want to do. And it's an ecosystem, because an ecosystem is unlike a hierarchy. It's a natural system where everything has a place and it comes together. We are interdependent. You can't just have plants or animals. You need plants and animals in an ecosystem to keep it harmonious and balanced. So that's an ecosystem. If you want to look at an organization, there was a great book by a guy called Sharma about 10 years ago, where he said, organizations are egosystems, not ecosystems. Yeah. Who's got the biggest ego? They float to the top, right? And they stroke their own ego because they're up there and you're down there somewhere. And maybe they don't even know your name. That's no way to operate as human beings. Human beings are better than that. And when we operate as an ecosystem and collaborate, the magic truly happens. This is actually an ecosystem that I created. This is a real example that's in a research article. I created this to show what we did. And at the time, I was running the executive capstone course for an executive MBA. But around that, we created a whole bunch of interdependent learning where people were going through other programs and connecting. So, for example, you'll see up there Creative Melbourne at the top. It was actually an international event that my company created. We brought people from NASA and Cirque du Soleil and from all around the world. We had not speakers, facilitators. It was all workshops where people got actively involved, not listening to lectures. We ran teams around projects. So you could have been working on a team with the deputy director of technology from NASA and the artist trainer from Cirque du Soleil, and you're working on a project for a charity. And that ecosystem gave us the ability to interact with each other and mentor each other and coach and share differences of opinion. And it's just a wonderful thing to create. I believe PeoPearl is trying to create an ecosystem, not exactly the same as this one. This one's a little bit in a university, a little bit out of a university. In the creative art, it's bringing arts and science together. But PeoPearl are bringing experts from a range of different backgrounds and expertise to create that ecosystem. So that's kind of what an ecosystem looks like. We haven't got a lot more time to talk more about that today, but is there any questions? Do any of you have an ecosystem in your work? I mean, they are out there. Is your work system more a hierarchy or an ecosystem? Maybe you could just pop in the chat, hierarchy or ecosystem. What's your workplace look like? Or you just say E or H if you're worried about typos. Getting some stuff come up, James?
Sharon says hierarchy.
Hierarchy, yep. To be honest, you know, Asia, Middle East, the organizations tend to be more hierarchical and process driven. In the creative industries, architecture tends to be less of a hierarchy and more of a design thinking ecosystem. So it does depend on like national culture, individual culture, the way in which entrepreneurial companies tend to be a bit more ecosystem orientated, particularly early on. But if they get really successful, they then evolve and become a hierarchy. I believe it's a backward evolution, but you know, process in large organizations is necessary, but too often process gets overdone and reinforces a bureaucracy, and that becomes a bit of a problem. Any other things popping up there, James, before we move on?
Same. One of them said H. Totally H.
Yeah. It is a challenge, right? And I've worked in them too. You know, like most universities are very bureaucratic, right? And I've done work for, you know, Cambridge, Oxford, Bangkok University, RMIT, and here Kaplan Business School in Singapore. You know, they tend to be hierarchies because they're a little bit overmanaged in the current. There's a great book written by a guy called Fleming just earlier this year called Dark Academia, and he's talking about how there's too much bureaucracy and too much corporatization in learning institutions, and it's damaging the learning experience. And hopefully organizations like PeoPearl are going to give you a different learning experience. And that's what an applied social learning ecosystem is. An experience where you want to be there, you're engaging with others, you're co-creating new knowledge and relationships with each other. It's as much about the intangibles as it is about the tangibles. And you go, oh, in business, there's not about intangibles. But, you know, if you look at the price of Google, their tangible assets are only worth 25% of the value of the company. So where's the rest of it come from? It's the intangibles. It's the knowledge, it's the people, it's the relationships, it's the brand. All of that stuff is intangible, right? But too often the business schools are focused on the tangibles. All right, I think we'll move on to the next concept if there's no questions about this. What I'm suggesting you do is have a look at the article, think about how you could set up an ecosystem in your organization. And maybe you can't change the whole organization, but maybe you can set up a community of practice. Maybe in your design team, you could actually run with the principles of an ecosystem rather than a hierarchy, and just try it and see how it goes. It truly is magic, and it will create huge value, and it will give you a lot of that sense of compassionate leadership, because you're leading as a collaborative set of people rather than as a hierarchy. Big difference to the value and the soft skills and the pleasure you get from your work. Okay, so that's applied social learning ecosystems. Let's have a little bit of a talk about the next topic. They're related. For those of you who are not from a learning industry background, there was a thing in the 1950s called, by a guy called Bloom. And they did this big study about how do you create the best learning. And they created 3 dimensions of learning. They said there's cognitive learning, which is all the thinking, tangible, measurable stuff. There's what they call the psychomotor, which is your ability to apply that. So, psycho, mind, and motor, action. So putting things into action. And there was a hierarchy for that. And then there's the other, the third one was called affective, which is about emotion, things like empathy, things like confidence, your connection to people, your connection to the thing that you're learning. But unfortunately, what happened mostly around the world, because the psychomotor, your ability to do stuff, and the affective, how you feel about it, how connected you are, they were more sort of intangible and not so measurable. So what happened is most learning at schools focused on the cognitive. And so they were focused on the technical, quantitative, measurable aspects of learning. And if you think about it, that's how most universities are today. It's very sort of academic, measurable, numbers. And even when you write an essay, you get brought back to a grade, and you got like, 7 out of 10 or 6 out of 10, or, if you're really brilliant, maybe 11 out of 10. What happened is those other really important social aspects of how you learn and how you connect with other people were lost from the learning system. So what we were doing was educating bright, intelligent, high IQ young people and very little high EQ attention. And in fact, a lot of creative people, as a result, fell out of the education system. So you find that people who are very artistic or very creative, or they wanted to dance or whatever, were sort of criticized for getting their maths wrong. And what it means is that we ended up with a very imbalance of people coming up, because we valued only the quantitative aspects of education instead of creating sort of like very well balanced citizens coming out of the education system. So what I was trying to address in writing about that, I was saying, there is a way to do learning that brings all 3 aspects back into the learning. And of course, that's acted on by an applied social learning ecosystem. But how do you actually do it? How do you make it happen? Well, in the original cognitive hierarchy of Bloom, there was like a pyramid of learning, right? And at the bottom, there was knowledge, and then there was understanding. So, if you went a level up, you understood what that knowledge meant, and then if you went up a level from that, you then understood how to apply it. And if you could apply it, you could analyze it. And if you could analyze it, you could evaluate how effective that learning was. And then in the end, you could create new understanding, new knowledge. And if you are up at the ability to create, you're a highly educated person, but only around the cognitive things. So if you look at these 3 hierarchies, cognitive means knowing, the affective is the feeling, and the psychomotor is the doing. So knowing, doing, and being. Now, if you think about that, what kind of person, what kind of leader do you want to be? Do you want to work with someone who's just a know-it-all, they know everything, but their relationships are rubbish and they actually don't know how to do stuff? Or do you know people who are really good at doing stuff, but they don't know the science behind it? Or do you want to interact with someone who's very loving, very warm and compassionate and very empathetic, but actually they're not very educated? And they don't sound like three pretty good choices, do they? I mean, it's like, my mother's not very educated, but I love her dearly, but I wouldn't go to her for, technical advice on computers because she can't help me with that. But imagine if you could create a way of educating people that took them through knowing, doing, and being and becoming something better. People who were balanced around all of those aspects. We all know someone who's really smart, but we don't like them, so we don't interact with them. We all know someone who's not very well educated, but we love them dearly, like my mother, right? So imagine if you could build this ecosystem of people who had a balanced experience of knowing, doing, and being. They were smart, they were clever, they were well educated, they knew how to apply what they know, and they knew how to interact with other people in a positive way and share the knowledge to co-create even more knowledge. That is what we're trying to create. And I would say, not just trying to create, we have created this. I've actually taken people through programs that are built around this reverse bloom. By the way, it's called reverse bloom because that hierarchy, you go from knowledge to understanding to application to evaluation to creation. But it's called reverse because what we do when we do reverse bloom is we bring people together and say, what do you think? Now, we've got this problem. How do you think we should solve that? James, what kind of experiences have you had in this area? And Agatha, what have you got to add? Sharon, have you got any opinions on this? We're not assuming knowledge because the problems of the future have not been solved. If we only work with what we already know, how are we going to solve those new problems? We didn't solve a lot of the problems from the pandemic from past knowledge. We had to learn, what does this mean? Oh, now it's mutated. We've got Delta. That's different. It's now, infecting differently. We are learning and creating new knowledge through socializing and sharing what we know and bringing together ideas, trying them. That worked. That didn't. Let's do this. We're actually solving future problems and developing by working in reverse. Let's share what we know. Okay, past knowledge is useful. We did learn some things from the 1918 Spanish flu epidemic. It was similar but different. Masks actually do work. Social distancing is the best tool we got. They knew that. So we can go back 100 years and learn from that. But now we need to apply it in different ways in the modern world. That's what reverse bloom learning framework is. So we're starting from the top. We are co-creating, gathering everything that we do know. We're then evaluating what of that, so prototyping, if you like. We're then testing that. We're applying that to see what happens. From that, we develop a deeper understanding, which then creates knowledge that didn't exist before. So it's a reverse of the traditional cognitive hierarchy. But even more important than that, we're socializing. So we're bringing in that part. So we're actually respecting each other. We're providing empathy. We're showing compassion for each other's. We're understanding that other people will see it different to us. And we're inviting that through questions. Oh, that's interesting, James. You're seeing that differently. How do we bring that into the conversation? What do you think, Agatha? Do you think that James has got a really good point here? So instead of telling, we're asking and exploring together. And that actually builds the trust and builds the inclusivity. And through that diversity of opinion and perspective, we're actually building more possible options to try. And then we put them through the prototyping. Design thinking is a little bit based on this. Yeah. If you're familiar with design thinking, anyone know what the first step in design thinking is? What's the first step? Do you remember what Sharon shared all that conversation ago, 10 or 15 minutes ago? Empathy. Empathize. Look at the problem. Look at the opportunity. It's not always just a problem, right? Nobody needed a smartphone until one was invented. Then everyone needed one. A smartphone didn't happen because someone was trying to solve a problem. If they were just looking at it as a problem, the smartphone would never have been invented. They look at it to say, where's the opportunity? So solving a problem is convergent thinking. You're focusing. You say, this is what we know. How do we solve it with what we know? Actually, design is the opposite. It's divergent thinking. Here we are. Where do we need to go? So you're starting from a point and opening out rather than starting with what you know and bringing it to a point. But actually, design thinking is iterative cycles. Diverge, converge, diverge, converge. That's why they call it the double diamond. This here takes you through those divergences, not just in thinking, but in thinking, socializing, and application. It brings it all together. So that is Reverse Bloom Learning Framework. The article is free. You can go and look it up. All of the principles are there. It tells you how to do it. It gives you the process. Please go and try it. And if you've got any questions, ask me a question. So are there questions popping up, or people are just listening so far, James?
So far, none. No questions
Okay.
asked yet.
Yep.
But
Remember,
we encourage you guys to pop in your questions.
absolutely encourage you. You know, you don't often get the opportunity, you know, to talk to people with levels of experience that you don't have. You know, and I'm not saying that makes, you know, asking me, you know, an expert makes me better than you. I'm just different to you. I just have a different set of knowledge. We all have knowledge. We all have experiences. And when we ask questions about those and share the differences, there's some slides on that later, which we probably won't touch on today, but they're in the deck. Have a look at what you think. And as I said, the book will be out soon anyway. So there's a full explanation coming. All right. Well, if there's no questions, I'll move on to the third of the four concepts. And we're traveling okay for time. We will go to wrap up at about 5 minutes before the half hour. So let's have a talk about the next element, which is the behavioral DNA of anything, really. This is just an example of collaboration. About 15 years ago, I created a thing called the organizational zoo. I'm not going to talk about it at length right now, but what it does, it's a creative way of stimulating conversations about behavior. It's a way to see the importance of behavioral diversity, and you can use that to understand how conflict happens. You can use that to understand how collaboration happens, and actually you can use that to understand different styles of leadership. So how it works, very, very briefly, is there's a deck of metaphor character cards. They're animals that represent a behavior. You know, the question, which animal am I, is completely the wrong question. Psychometric profiles say you are one of these. You fit this box. You know, whether it's, you know, Herman Brain or DISC or Myers-Briggs or whatever it is. They go, you, James, are an ESTP. You go, oh, what does that mean? You know, so you then think, oh, so I have to be like this, do I? No, not at all. You are a human being. You are remarkable. You can decide how you're going to behave, and you can learn how to behave differently in different circumstances. And that's what the zoo says. The zoo says, which of these should you be right now? Do you want to be the control and command lion? And that might be appropriate right now. Let me tell you a little story very briefly. When my daughter was about 4, I was working out of China. I had a big project running in China. And she's just a 4-year-old kid, right? And we were in Hong Kong on our way to China. And she saw some barriers near the road. And of course, she sees barriers. She goes, oh, monkey bar, I'll climb. So this is the purpose of this barrier, is to keep people away from the traffic, right? So she jumps on this barrier and starts swinging like towards a double-decker bus coming down the road. You know, in that moment, I grabbed her, pulled her off this rail, put her on the ground and said, what are you doing? That's dangerous. Can't you see that bus? That is control and command. It's important to have control and command because my daughter's life is at stake. Now, the very next second, this is about behavioral choice, right? I could have kept yelling at her all the way back to the hotel. It wouldn't have solved anything. The very next second, I came down to her level, come right down, looked her in the eye and said, I was so scared. Did you see that bus? Boy, imagine if that bus hit you. That was so scary. I don't want to lose you. Don't do things that's dangerous. So I switched my behavior from control and command to caring, which is another character in the deck. Yeah. So we don't make those choices often enough. Too often, we just react emotionally instead of making choices about how to act in order to protect something. What the behavioral DNA does is I give the deck of cards and I just say, look, what do you reckon are the best behaviors for collaboration? Put those in the expected column, and you can see they lay them out here into 4 rows. This is what I would expect to be really good. The second row, these are also good. That's the desired, the light green. The next row is, I would tolerate this, but it's probably not the best thing to do in this circumstance, whether it's collaboration or conflict or leadership or whatever you choose to be your context. And the bottom row is, under no circumstances whatsoever, should you behave like that, it's only going to make it worse. If you start behaving like a lion when we're trying to collaborate, it's going to destroy it. Now, what you see there in the multicolored drawing is there were 5 groups of people, about 6 people in the group. So this was a collective of the opinion of 30 different people in the room. And what they do is, you can see that where it's colored in green, group number 4 and 5 selected Ant to be absolutely effective. And Ant is just the task worker, get stuff done. Yeah. I'm not going to talk about it anymore because I want to touch on becoming adaptable just briefly. And this leads into that as well. But what this does, it shows you that groups of people have different opinions about what is appropriate and inappropriate behavior in context. And what it does, it shows you where those different opinions are, and not to say, no, James, you're wrong. That's not the way it is. You say, oh, James, that's really interesting. You actually put it at one end and I put it at the other. So let's explore that. Why do we see it so differently? Is it background? Is it culture? Is it, personal style? But we can have an open conversation, exchanging our points of view. Oh, actually, you make a really good point. I've never seen that before. But, I can understand in your circumstances that why you put that there, which then develops trust and relationship. If you can visualize behavior and visualize culture, which is what we're doing here, then we can understand how to adapt. And if you adapt your behavior, you change the culture. And that's what becoming adaptable is about. So this is the last topic, and then we're going to wrap up in a couple of minutes. When I started talking about becoming adaptable, I made this quote: you don't need a crystal ball to know your world is going to get turned upside down at times. Plan for it by becoming adaptable. If you're actually building your resilience, building your consciousness about your behavior, and making choices about your behavior, you know what? I don't need to get into this argument. I can step away from this. Yeah. Or no, I do need to get into this argument. I do need to pull my, almost aggressively pull my daughter off that railing because it's dangerous. I do need to step up and support my team when the boss is trying to cut the budget. I need to go in there and fight hard. Yeah. So sometimes aggression is appropriate. Sometimes it's not. Willing, intelligent followers make choices consciously and intelligently, and you will create people who want to follow you. You will create a group that want to follow each other. And that's collaborative leadership, right? So where you're working together. So just on the last thing, the main thing about becoming adaptable that I want to share with you is this DNA picture. It's DNA because what we're trying to do is to adapt, to build this behavioral choice into our DNA. That means it's just the way we are, but we can change it over time. We can become even more and more adaptable over time. So how do I become adaptable? It's fairly simple to say, but very difficult to do, right? It's like me. If I see a chocolate cake, I'd say, yeah, I know I shouldn't eat that chocolate cake. And all of a sudden the chocolate cake is in my mouth, right? We have to work on it over time. But the more you do it, it's like riding a bike. The more you do it, you get fitter and faster and fitter and faster. So just keep trying. So that the 8 steps towards becoming adaptable are, first of all, acknowledge the differences. Someone has a different opinion, don't fight with them about it, explore it with them. So if you acknowledge that there are differences of opinion and differences of culture and different ways of behaving, you can respect that other perspective. You can say, well, okay, it's not what I would do, but they're an adult, they can make up their own mind. And if you do that, you can then converse, engage in conversation. Agatha, that's really interesting. I think I could learn something from that. I like the way that you dealt with that. Please explain to me why you work that way. So you're inquiring to learn as to why other people do things differently to the way you do them. And when you inquire and converse, actually, it highlights opportunities for you to adapt. So you can adapt to build your capabilities, whether they be knowing, doing, or being. Sometimes you can learn how to behave differently. Other times you learn a piece of knowledge that you can then make a different decision from. Other times you learn how to do something. Knowing, doing, being, in order to become more capable across all of those, to be a well-rounded individual across all of those capabilities, because that's what makes us human. Actually knowing, doing, and being and becoming better, continuously improving, engaging in collaboration with others to co-create social value. That is what I think can really make us better. Now, I'm over time. I apologize for the extra couple of minutes, but I'll hand back to James to thank you for your time. I wish I had more questions, but maybe you'll send questions, maybe you'll download the papers, and I hope to hear from you sometime soon. Thank you, James. Over to you.
Thank you, Arthur. Thank you for that. We do have one comment or question around. No, it's actually a comment, and Sharon, who finds your Zoom metaphor very, very interesting, and she's even asking if it's available online.
There is an online version of it. It's very simple and it's free. It's not anywhere near as socially engaging because you can just move some things around yourself. The value of the cards is you start with the cards and you move them around the table. It's very kinesthetic and social because you're doing it in groups. Whereas the online thing, you're just moving your words around to say what kind of behaviors that might look like. But I'm happy to talk to people and share ideas with them in another forum.
Arthur, I've got a question on your last slide. I'm not sure whether we have time for it. If I can just ask the quick question.
Go ahead, Sharon.
Okay, point number 4, you said inquire to learn, your last slide. Yep. So what if the inquire to learn encounter a roadblock, i.e. the person is not willing to share? Because, Asian being Asian, sometimes they want to have their own IP to themselves, and then you start, you basically can't even learn from them if they're not going to share. What happened then?
No, it's a really, really good point, and I'll answer it very briefly. I mean, I could talk about that for an hour, right? At one stage of my life, I was the global knowledge director for a very large international company, the market leader in its field at the time. And I dealt with that problem on a daily basis, where I was trying to get people to share what they know through communities of practice. And the resistance was always, but this is my knowledge. If I share that, then maybe they'll make me redundant, or maybe, but actually time after time after time, I was able to demonstrate that the more people shared, the more value was actually created. It's a bit like soup, right? No one can make soup on their own if they've only got one ingredient. But if I've got a carrot and you've got a potato and someone's got some rice and if we actually put it all in together, we all get, to have some of that. Whereas none of us could have it if we just stick to our own. Encourage them to share, and I can send you some examples of that. But there were literally tens of millions of dollars in value that were created when these people started sharing that was not there before. And it's absolutely important. And the way you do that is you ask questions. And you know what? Some people are never going to share. Just leave them out. Work with the ones that will share. That's a short answer, but a great question. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I I know this is going to be violating things, but I just wanted to insert one more question, and maybe it's a yes or a no thing coming from Dennis. Has compassionate leadership increased in the last year? Just a quick answer.
Yeah. From my perspective, yes. But from some people's perspectives, no. Some people have become harder, but we're all different, right? The people who are going to be successful in future adapted, and are continuing to do so, and that's a positive thing for the world.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that, Arthur. Uh, Resonates a lot, especially with the current situation we are all
Yeah.
experiencing right now in terms of the enterprise. So thank you. And there you have it, folks. Wonderful insights around leading with diversity, adaptability, and compassion from our guest expert, Arthur Shelley. So we're going to flash one slide that has a QR code. As we say our thanks to the people who brought this event to reality, we're going to flash that QR code right now to invite you to tell us what you think of this session, of this event, of this forum. We've also actually posted that into the group chat box. So please feel free to link that up or scan the QR code. So we will take feedback coming from you. And on this note, while you're doing that, first thank you goes to Arthur Shelley for a wonderful session today. Really, really appreciate the time that you've spent with us. Next, thank you is to the people, colleagues who brought this event to reality. Thank you as well. And a final thank you to all of you in the audience for joining and participating in our Agony Expert series for today. And please, we do encourage you to check out our other Agony Expert sessions for the whole month of August. Um, we would love to have you in one or two of our sessions, one or two more of our sessions, or even all. So on that note, this has been James Porticos, your moderator from PPRL, and we will see you in the upcoming sessions. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your afternoon, your evening, or even your morning.
Thank you very much, folks. Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Thank you very
Arthur.
much. Thank you, everyone.